more bits and pieces out of the collection. When Carl starts working on a project, I end up tagging along and following up on things. This is a Sperry directional gyro from about 1916 for an aircraft stabilizer. They weren't just relying on their stick in the rudder back then. Got a 24-hour clock, French, an 8-day pocket watch in an aluminum mounting frame. This is a lovely version of an automobile clock into a propeller hub, and I believe that, let's see, LWF on the plate there, I believe is the manufacturer's logo for the Lowe, Willard, and Fowler Company of College Point, New York, who built a number of their own aircraft as well as manufacturing some of the various Curtiss flying boats for the Navy. Not everything that comes into the collection is in the greatest shape. This is an Alginate 8-day clock for the Navy. We started going through clocks after Carl started looking at looking for the clock for the Poisson. So you will see a few clocks.
What's special about 8 days instead of 7?
So you wind it once a week and you don't run out of, or it doesn't run down on you, I guess. Maybe that's how long they can get the spring to work.
A horologist's dream.
We used to have them in missiles, and once a week we would have to check it against WWI and adjust the clock to make sure it's right, because we're going to fight World War III. We want to be accurate.
You don't want to be late.
Yeah, it's really funny. I had this 8-day clock to fight World War III.
Anyway, underneath the white paint there, it actually says ASSC, Army Service Signal Corps, which would make it one of the earlier, just like this other one, which would make it one of the, that's what, the 1917 to 18 to
Period, yeah, because it's Signal Corps.
Because it says Army Air Service Signal Corps. Before then, they had different naming, and then after that, they called it just Air Service. This is a propeller that was developed, I don't know how many of you have wandered around outside and seen the Olmstead pusher aircraft. This was a propeller designed by the same guy. This was actually designed for a Curtiss Jenny. And these propellers were, with that thick base and the broad base, were apparently much more efficient than the conventional propellers at the time. But,
because of low revolution. It's a low revolution propeller.
Yeah.
That's because the engines were running at a lower revolution.
So it's not a revolutionary technology.
Well, I know Carl must get along great together. But here's some data plates from a SPAD 13, which donor grandfather was removed from a wrecked aircraft at Colombe-les-Belles during the winter of 1917-18. They were considering this for a U.S. airfield, and these were in some wrecked or otherwise junked SPADs in that hangar left behind by the French. And so he went through souveniring, and a few years later we became the beneficiaries. This is the clock that he found at the same time. And here is something that you heard mentioned of earlier, the 91st Aero Squadron insignia from a SPAD 2A, or from Samson 2A2. You actually have probably, some of you have seen this before, back in 2013 when I was talking about Blair Thaw Samson. But Carl has pulled this out of collection, or out of storage in the mall building, brought it back, and we've done high-resolution photos of this now.
How high resolution?
We can print it out full size at 300 dots per inch. And that is about an 8 foot or so length of fabric. This is a quick stitch of the low resolution version. So you're going to be looking at something that is about 30,000 pixels by 10,000 pixels.
And we have it tentatively identified from Alan Tully.
Yeah, Alan Tully has said this was the plane flown by Willis Diekema and Fred Seiper, and they achieved three victories on November 4th, 1918,
Yes.
which would be the three crosses.
So just parenthetically, John, since we're on that, since you mentioned Seiper, he was from New Jersey.
Go ahead.
Remind me to stop mentioning pilots. Yeah,
I'm
Charlie?
sorry, where did you say you got this fabric from?
We didn't say who we got it from, we say this was in the collection, and we believe we know who it came from, and that it was not cataloged when Carl Schneider got it.
According to Alan, it was
Frey.
yeah, it was donated by Gordon Frey, and this is the person we were actually talking about at lunch. You've seen this one before too, but this is the other side of that aircraft, we believe.
Oh, cool.
Back and forth? So this was conserved?
This was conserved and mounted on stable fabric. This came from Cord Meyer, who was a friend of Bill and Blair Thaw's, and he was actually in the plane with Blair when Blair was killed. And so for the longest time, this was down in the record as being part of that aircraft. Until I looked at it, it said French, and the record said de Havilland 4. But I talked about that back in 2013.
And so we have the flip side.
So now we have, this came from Robert Suberon, who actually passed this piece on to Cord Meyer, having got it from Bill and Blair Thaw's sister. But this has got the flag. One thing we can look at now is we've got both sides of the same air. Well, I hope so. We can look at, we've got two copies of the same Squadron Insignia.
And it may be two different airplanes for all we know. We don't
Could
know.
be two different airplanes because,
John?
yeah,
So this is the left side of the fuselage.
this is the left side of
If
the
you go to the
fuselage.
other one, or that one,
And wouldn't that typically, that's interesting, that insignia is flying towards the cockpit, if is that the right
No,
side?
that's the right side. So again, the flag is flying back.
Okay.
It looks like the flag might be smaller in size.
Well, these are not.
Matched in size,
These are
because
not
look at the
matched in size.
17.
This is, again, this is another, we photographed this in high resolution. This is a quick stitch. We did not try scaling things on either of these. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 longerons.
I think these may have been two different Samsons, though.
They might have been.
The style of the number is different.
No,
One is, this one's angular, the other one is,
That's a very, look at the one.
How many longeron stitches are there?
3, 4, 5 between the top of the blue field and the bottom of the lower red stripe. And we have got, it's harder to tell on this, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, longerons between.
Because this is a bit wider piece of fabric.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
and they're both the same number. This one, we know Blair Thaw was with the First Aero Squadron between, well, up until mid to late July of 1918. So, and that numbering style on both these is very characteristic of that period, because we have a later First Aero Squadron Samson fabric piece in the collection, which has a much different number style.
And there is one other thing on this piece of fabric. Go ahead, John.
And the later one is the surface number on it is 3, but it's been painted over at number 17, so we can definitely compare two different styles of numbering, and the later ones are much blockier. The flag insignia is also much different.
And there's pencil writing on this.
This one has writing on it as well. The only part that I sent a copy of this over to Ben Sullivan, the photographer we worked with. He's been a contractor. In fact, he photographed this here one day when Garber was closed down because they had water problems. Potable water problems, not water in the facility. And he noticed from the low resolution one that I sent that there is writing on this, in this area.
In pencil.
And, well, I'm not sure
Or
it's pencil. It may be pen. But I got out, and in fact, I think it is pen because it's very dark and it's very clean lines. But the only part I've been able to read so far are the last 2 lines, which say Blair Thaw, July 1918. Now, a couple of things that I want to do now that we've got this. I want to compare the 2 flags to see if they were using a stencil for these. And I would also like to look at the lettering on these to see if it corresponds. The positioning is about the same. See that in this case the 17's painted over one of the left here markings, and then there's another one in the next section. Here they may have painted over, but again the positioning is about the same. And some of the other things, I want to look at that writing, figure out what of course we need to find out what it all says. Just going over the original photos, I'll see about doing some enhancement of the photos, playing with the color balances. If necessary, and if I can talk Carl into it, I will try infrared or UV multispectral imaging. Maybe when the conservator comes over to look at them in a couple of weeks. And as I said, I want to check to see if the flags are from a stencil. Keyboard is a problem. And another thing I'm curious about is this side being completely uniform, almost completely uniform, except for right up under this weight, there's a little bit of tan. I'm curious as to whether that's actually, if that might have been overpainted at some point, although if it was, I would almost expect these to have been overpainted or to have something else put in its place. Yeah?
I've been an artist for a long time, and I don't have any training on this at all, but for my guess, that was hand painted on the field in the vertical. That was not painted horizontally. The vertical painting I've done is very hard to control sag. When you're painting, he has an awful lot of inconsistency in those stripes, and you can see the blue field has the same flow of the fabric, but the stars don't. When he paints the blue field, especially, you can see it more in the other photograph, you can see the blue field, how it bows out on the bottom right. is following the same billow as you can see at the tip of the
Yeah, well,
flag.
I think they...
But then by hand, he was painting straight lines with stars. I doubt very seriously that's a stencil.
Well, I think the overall, if you look at the overall shape, though, I think we may find stencil. We also actually have there was one other piece that came in with this that is of an American flag, too. So we've actually got 3 pieces of fabric showing the Squadron insignia that we can look at.
I mean, my guess would have been it was the same artist that did both of them.
Oh, I'm sure it is, especially if it's the same side of the, or if it's the same aircraft with different sides.
John, any pictures of 17? Any contemporary pictures from the...
Not of this one.
No?
We have contemporary pictures of the later,
Of 3.
of the 317, the Joe Basto fabric. But we do not have any contemporary pictures of this one. We do have contemporary pictures of another aircraft from the squadron, number 10. But we don't have pictures of this particular one. That's not saying there aren't any, but we haven't come across any yet. And then I'm also going to, one other thing, I'm going to be adding another to the collection of, to my book collection. You know, like most people, I have about 4 sections in my library: fiction, nonfiction, aviation, and Gutman aviation. So I'm about to add the Colin Hours and John Gutman Flying Machines Press, whenever I can find a copy, on the Thompson aircraft, because it has nice I remember from previously working with it, it has very useful information about the manufacturer's stenciling and camouflage patterns. So I want to try to match the 2 up.
I can lend you mine in the meantime.
Yeah. And
Stay tuned.
whenever I've got it, you'll be among the first to hear.
Thank you, John.